Hey guys, what's up? JC with Big Game Real Estate. Today we're going to talk letters of intent. We went over residential versus commercial leases in another video, but a letter of intent, one, it's obviously used when you're looking to purchase a building. So again, if you and your investors are getting together, you see a property you like, you're going to submit a letter of intent with your business terms. It's important to note that the letter of intent is a non-binding document. So even if you get the seller to agree to all of your business terms, you are not obligated to purchase that building until the actual purchase contract is mutually executed by both parties. But today we're really going to talk about letters of intent from the standpoint of you're already a landlord. Okay, and you have a commercial property, whether that be office, industrial, or retail, or a mixed use, combining those, and you have a potential tenant that wants a lease, or you have a broker bringing you a letter of intent. What should you look for? What really needs to be in there? Okay, remember, the letter of intent is only for the business terms. So once we agree upon this offer or letter of intent, same thing, you're going to have a lease drawn up by your attorneys, and there's going to be some legal items in there, some insurance, so on and so forth. But for the letter of intent, let's run through it of what you want to see. Number one, what's the offer price per square foot, right? You have 10,000 square feet you're leasing out. What is the offering per square foot? Are your leases going to be gross or triple net? Meaning, is the guy paying one price, or are you going to put the CAM taxes and insurance for the building on top of the base rent? That's called a triple net lease. That's what most folks do. It favors the landlord. And what amount that tenant pays in those triple net costs is divided by their pro rata share of the building. So again, we want to see what the price offering is. We want to know what the increases are, right? Rent's going to be increased every year. What are they offering? We're going to want to know what they're offering in lease term. We know commercial leases, we want to see 5 to 10 years minimum. Again, that allows us to go back to the bank, refinance if we need to. Obviously, we have to have a good tenant, the strength of our tenant. We'll talk about that in a moment. And in addition to the initial lease term, are they looking for any options? Are they looking for a 5-year lease with one option to renew, 10 years with 2 options? Is it an office? They only want 3 years, etc. We're also going to want to know who's the tenant and what's the guarantee. And this is going to be really big. So what do I mean by guarantee? Well, you're going to give let's say a 5 or 10 year lease. What's the guarantee that the tenant's going to pay the rent for that long? So a 2-year guarantee or a 3-year guarantee means from the time the lease is signed, that tenant is going to guarantee 2 to 3 years worth of rent no matter what happens. Once we negotiate that, we have to ask that tenant, well, what do you have to actually guarantee this with, right? I can guarantee you whatever I want, but if I don't have the money to pay you, it doesn't matter. So you're going to want to look at their financials. You're going to want to look at potentially their business, but you want to see if they own things, hard assets. Real estate, okay, is a big one because, yes, it helps if they have money in bank accounts, but they can always take that money out of the bank account. Okay, and if they're in financial trouble, chances are they've already taken the money out by the time it gets to you. But you want to look for some hard assets. You want to make sure that the person or the group is not over leveraged. How many partners are on this LLC? And even if they're going to say, you'll hear a lot of guys say, well, I want to do a corporate guarantee. I want to put it under my company. Okay, you can do that, but what is your company? Right? What does your company own? How many leases are signed with your company? And again, this applies to office, industrial, retail. If I tell you, if I want to lease your space and I say, well, I own 50 stores or I own, 50, or I'm a tenant in 50 warehouses across the country. Awesome. But if I'm going to form a single LLC for this property, that's no good, right? Because the LLC is protecting me if something goes wrong. So a corporate guarantee would be if all of those leases or companies were under one LLC and they were assets, you would probably feel more comfortable as a landlord. But if it's a single LLC, a new LLC that they just created, you got to be very careful. And then you can allow them to put the lease in the LLC's name, but you still need a personal guarantee, which again goes off their personal financials. You want to know if they're expecting any landlord work, right? You got a warehouse, you want them to take it as is. Tenant's going to come in and they're going to say, hey, I need lighting, electrical, plumbing, mechanical, all up to code. So you're going to want to see that in there. or you're going to want to put it in there, right? If you say, hey, I don't want to do anything, you're going to say, hey, tenant takes this property as is, where is. They can have the opportunity rather to view the property, see if it meets their requirements and make a decision. Or you can agree to give them all of those things up to code, right? How about landlord work? Are they expecting you to do anything to your space? If you have a shopping center, for example, and the previous tenant was a restaurant and the new tenant is a spa, and they say, look, this is a great built out restaurant, but we don't need all this stuff. We want what's called a vanilla box, which means a clean box painted or ready for paint so they can go in there and do their stuff. Well, you got to figure out, hey, how much is that going to cost you to do? Okay. Is the guarantee of this tenant worthy enough for you to spend whatever money you have to spend and go do that for them? Is the lease term long enough? Or again, you could say, I'm delivering the space as is and tenant does all the work. So we have to know when the rent commencement is, right? Because if the tenant is going to go in there, they're going to have to do work in an office, maybe some offices, or a retail building. When do they anticipate paying rent? So they're going to sign the lease today, but do they need 2 months to build their space out? Do they need 3 months to build their space out? Do they need 6 months? Do they need permits? So these are some of the things that you're going to want to see. I like to tie rent commencement for the tenant. If I'm looking at a tenant, I obviously like to have it contingent on permits, but make sure they apply for permits, building permits within 30 days, okay? Because you can say, hey, 6 months and your rent's due, but the reality is if they don't have everything done, you want them to survive, right? You want them to be open and be making money. You're going to want to know if they want any free rent, any actual rent abatement, right? They may just ask you for 2 months free, and that may be okay if it's a very small or simple build out or they know what they're doing. Then you have to decide, do you want to add those months to the back of the lease? So if they ask for 6 months, you want 10 years of rent after that 6 months, it's a 10-year and 6-month lease. Or is it a 10-year lease and the first year you're getting less rent? You have to decide that. Bathrooms, do they need bathrooms? Does it need to be ADA? Obviously, we spoke about exclusions in another video. If it's a retail site, you're going to want to know, are they asking for any exclusions? What type of business do they do? What type of service do they have? Because you may have an exclusion. You may have an existing exclusive with another tenant. So again, you don't want to cannibalize your tenants, right? You don't want to put 2 pizza places in the same shopping center because one of them is going to suffer and you may not get your rent. That's usually not a big deal in industrial or office because they're not selling a product, they're not providing a service. It's done over the phone. Or industrial, they're moving stuff out to another place, or they're service providers and they're not really selling anything. So yes, you could have in an office 2 mortgage companies. You could have 3 Amazon companies because they're not coming into that office to purchase things. But in a retail environment, you're going to want to look to have those exclusions to help your tenants make money and protect you. And we went over how to protect you in another video. What else? Obviously, signage. If they're looking to put signage on a building, you want to make sure that everything's up to code. Everything is approved by the town. Again, parking. We spoke about that in another video. How many employees do they have? If it's an office, if it's office or industrial. If it's a multi-tenant building, you want to know what they're going to be taking up. If it's a retail use, how many employees, but more so, what's the business? If it's a gym, okay, they have their classes generally 5 to 9 a.m., same time in the evening. So those hours they're going to have more cars in that parking lot. You want to make sure that that's not obviously going to disrupt your other tenants. That's not really going to be. That may or may not be in a letter of intent, but that's some things that you're obviously going to be looking for. Again, governmental approvals, and you want to make sure you have anything that's prohibited that you don't want. If you have an industrial building, that's great. You want, if someone says, well, I do automotive, well, what does that mean? Or I'm going to have trucks here. Well, what does that mean? Are you going to be servicing the trucks here? Are you going to be parking? Oh, you're going to be servicing? What kind of servicing? Well, we do mostly electrical. Well, that's fine. You're going to want to know if they're going to be changing oil and potentially have an environmental issue. And if that's the case, you can still lease to them, but you may want to have an environmental test done now. And then once they leave to see what if they've increased the levels at any point. So guys, that's a brief overview of commercial leases. There are some specifics when you get into office, industrial, and retail that we'll cover at a later time. But for now, guys, have a great one. I'm going out in the field. We'll make another one today. I'll see you soon.